today. Officially welcome to our April speed learning session, how top nonprofits actually use their CRM to drive growth. My name again is Tara Peitzer, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications at Giveffect. And for those of you who are not as familiar, Giveffect is an all-in-one nonprofit platform that brings together the tools organizations need to operate effectively, including donor management, volunteer management, CRM, marketing, and more. All of the tools to help your nonprofit operate smoothly, achieve operational efficiency and financial stability, as well as to help you further your mission. And today I'm so excited to welcome my colleague, our speaker, Hannah Fox. Hannah Fox is Giveffect's Customer Experience Manager. Before we dive into today's session, I just want to go over a couple of things. So today's session's format, again, it's our speed learning session. It's just a quick 30-minute session broken up by 20 minutes of learning, followed by 10 minutes of audience Q&A. So please be sure to share your questions throughout the session using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. We are also going to be doing something fun and different. In case any of you have been on our speed learning sessions before, this is something new, but we are actually going to give away coffee to 3 of you joining us today. So to enter, simply follow us on LinkedIn, like one of our April posts, and share a key takeaway or something you've learned from today's session or something you plan to do from today's session in the comment. But be sure to tag at Giveffect in that comment so we can find you easily. You're going to have until noon Eastern time today, so that's 30 minutes after today's session ends, to again, follow us on LinkedIn, pick an April post, share a comment, and tag at Giveffect, and you'll receive notification if you've won via email. So this is something that we're just trying out to make this even more fun and valuable for you. So with that, oh, can someone put the link to the specific LinkedIn for Giveffect? Yes. Hannah, do you mind grabbing
Yep,
that for
I'll
me?
grab it.
Great. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get started. Most nonprofits have a CRM, but few are using it to drive growth. Based on your responses to this session's registration form, all of you can relate. I think that there are only out of everyone who registered for today, only two said that they're all fully aligned. So I think so many of us can learn from today's session. So insights from our impact survey of Giveffect customers did reveal that organizations with broader team adoption are significantly more likely to report fundraising growth. In other words, when more of the team is actively working in a shared system, outcomes tend to improve. And really, collaboration is not the end goal, it's what enables growth. When teams align in one system, they move faster, make better decisions, and raise more. And when we say growth, we're not just talking about raising more. We're also talking about more consistent campaigns, stronger donor relationships, and the ability to scale without adding complexity. Without that alignment, growth becomes inconsistent, harder to sustain, and much more resource intensive, which naturally leads to 2 important questions. Are you using your CRM in a way that actually supports your team? And is your current system designed to make that possible? And that's what we're going to focus on today. What top nonprofits are doing differently in practice and how that shows up in their day-to-day work. So with that, I'd like to again thank Hannah for being here with us today. Hannah, let's start with where growth breaks down more often. Where do you see the biggest gap between having a CRM and actually seeing growth from it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Firstly, I'm super excited to be here. As the client experience manager at Giveffect, I've had the opportunity to work so closely with hundreds of nonprofits and help them really think through how they use their systems day to day and where that growth really starts to happen. So first, just wanted to say thanks. But really back to your question, where we see growth break down most often is the gap between having the system and having the consistent team-wide usage of it. So most organizations have some kind of CRM in place, and a lot of people are using parts of it actually quite effectively. But that usage is often pretty uneven. And so that means like one team or one person is really highly engaged, while some others are working outside of the system or maybe using it differently. And what this really does is it creates gaps in the data and in the visibility, which makes it pretty difficult to fully understand like really what's working and where to focus. I think because of that, teams will start to kind of fall back into some of these reactive habits instead of using the system to really plan and guide decisions. So, I really the challenge is not access to the right tools, right? There are so many tools out there, but rather aligning the team around a shared workflow and using that system consistently enough to actually drive the growth. I just read an interesting nonprofit technology report that said 70% of nonprofits have 5+ tech tools, which is up from 62% in 2025, which I think is something that we see really consistent from our own clients coming to us. I'm curious too in the chat, if you're, here with us, then please join in. Like how many tools are you actually using? But again, that's just something that we see. And the point I really want to drive home here is that regardless of the tool or tools rather that you're using, team-wide adoption is really what drives the growth. We also do an impact survey each year and collect data from our own clients, and we saw that teams who reported the organization-wide adoption, so meaning multiple departments, more than 50% of employees who are using Giveffect, actually reported higher fundraising growth than the teams who said they had low adoption. So somewhere, meaning 20% or less using their team using Giveffect. So I find that super interesting, just that really adoption is so deeply tied to fundraising growth.
So interesting. Moving on to the next question. When teams move from reactive campaigns to planning together earlier, what changes in how campaigns perform and the results they drive?
Yeah, in a reactive environment, each team is responding to directly what's in front of them. So, development is focused on the immediate fundraising needs. Marketing is pushing out communications based off of their calendar and their timing. And programs are coordinating logistics independently. But there's really limited visibility in how all of these efforts connect. When that planning can happen earlier and it's not happening so reactively, teams can really align around a shared objective before that execution begins. So that means that all of these teams, development, marketing, programs, are contributing to that same plan rather than reacting to each other's outputs. I think practically, this really reduces the duplicate work and can improve the timing and the consistency and communication, and really allows the team to build off of each other's efforts rather than like all working in parallel. We've heard from Harvest Hope Food Bank at our virtual summit next, just last month, that they really emphasized this point that without collaboration, it's super hard to have consistent messaging and consistent timing for campaigns across a team. They shared that it's really less about adding complexity and more about creating this organized, repeatable rhythm, all working off of one source of truth. So, and also with plenty of lead time before the campaign. That was a big part of our conversation with them, is that planning happens really early. So at a high level, I think it looks like setting aside time before a campaign or before some kind of initiative to really align on the goal, the audience, and the approach.
So helpful. So, to make it even more practical, what's one shift teams can make this quarter?
Yeah, great question. Teams can start by reviewing what's worked previously. So whether that's the donor engagement piece or event participation, campaign performance overall, and use that information to shape the next plan. From there, I think it allows roles to be clearly defined as a group. Marketing understands, when they're to be communicating and when, and development knows how outreach needs to be supported. But I think importantly, let's make sure everyone knows each other's roles and what support looks like, and also what that timeline is. And I think a really cool action to take is to, for the first time that you're doing this, create an SOP so that you can do this year after year and not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Just really having your process down and everyone, again, fully aligned on um, that process. All right, so moving on to our next question. When teams think they're aligned, growth can still stall. Where do silos show up most, and how do they hold organizations back from growing?
Mhm. I think growth can stall because alignment doesn't carry into execution. So the silos will tend to show up in how teams are managing the outreach and the engagement. For example, I think development might be reaching out to donors while marketing sending campaigns. And again, this isn't coordinated. And so the duplicate work is happening. And unfortunately, too, it's impacting your donors. There is a level of donor fatigue that happens when they're getting hit from many different angles, I think. We've seen this with organizations like Habitat for Humanity Kansas City in their year-end campaign. So for some context, they shared that this is really an appeal that involves so many different departments, and so many different analytics, because they're really trying to target these specific groups like lapsed donors. And they're also trying to do all of this trying to beat the clock before the end of the year. Um, Before they had everything centralized, they were keeping their data on different spreadsheets, and things started to fall through the cracks. So checks weren't being input, donors weren't being followed up with. Things were not getting done. But then on top of that, different teams were also engaging those same supporters without full visibility into others' activity. So we didn't know, they didn't know that one person was being reached out to by another team member. And so the result wasn't just this like inefficiency or things falling through the cracks, but it really was missed growth. I think a win that came from this once they did move towards a more centralized system was that they said that they were actually able to get to stewardship much faster because they were working with so much more efficiency. So really, once everything does live in that one place, similar to what we see really with Giveffect customers, is that the visibility improves so naturally, and teams can start to really see the full picture of engagement and coordinate, and this just leads to those stronger results.
Thank you for that. And this next question is really going to resonate with so many of you here today. Excuse me, based off the responses on today's session's registration form. Many teams collect data but do not see better results. What are top performing nonprofits doing differently, and how does that impact outcomes?
I love this question because you're right. I think a lot of teams are collecting so much data. Um, we've talked about it before, even just the overwhelming amount of data. But the difference that top performing nonprofits, what they're doing is that they're consistently turning their data into decisions. So what that looks like in practice, I think can be pretty simple, but really intentional. So instead of broad outreach, they're using their data to target really specific segments and tailor their approach. For example, identify a group of recent donors and following up with them with a really personalized message can lead to this higher conversion and stronger donor retention and engagement. I just saw a data point recently that it costs 5 to 7 times more to acquire a new donor rather than retain an existing one, which I think is fascinating. And also, a donor who gives 3 years in a row has an 80% plus likelihood of continuing to give. So I think the question really is like, how can you use your data to turn someone into a donor that is giving those 3 years in a row and encouraging that continued giving from them. So if you know that this lives in your CRM somewhere, but you aren't taking action on it, you might know, yes, this person is has given to us 3 years in a row, or at least you know that you could find that somewhere, but you're not taking action on it. I think those really are some missed opportunities. So it's really not about having more data, but it's about using the data that you already have to guide what's next.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And so many teams can really focus on collecting the data, but to your points that you made, it's really about the action that matters.
Mhm.
So, how can organizations tell if their lack of growth is a process issue or a system limitation? And what should leaders look for?
Yeah. If a team can do it, they want to do it, but it's not happening. It's a process issue, right? So if you have all the systems in place and you could do it, but you're not, it's time to really reevaluate and look at the process. But also then on the flip side, if a team wants to do it, but it's super difficult, it can be a system limitation. So I think tools really should support the collaboration among teams. And if your tools are making it harder for you to work together and to find information, then it's time to really take a step back and determine like, is it our team and is this a process issue, or is it the systems and the tools that we're using?
Yeah, very well said. Thank you for that. And just as a quick reminder, we're going to be asking one more question during this section before moving into audience Q&A. So please do add any questions that you have using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. All right, next question. If someone wants to see more growth this year, what is the one shift they should make?
Great question. I think I have two things here. One is involve your team earlier and plan together using the data to guide decisions. The earlier that your team can align, I think the more intentional that a coordinated execution can be. And then secondly, evaluate whether your system is really actively supporting collaboration. So again, a system should make it easier for teams to be able to work together, to have shared visibility, to stay aligned. And if it's not doing that, and if your system is not working for you, then the issue is not just your usage or it's not just adoption, but it's really how the system is working for your workflows.
All right, let's see. So now we're going to go into cut audience Q&A. The first question we have here is how to convince more senior members to focus more on using CRM in day-to-day operations.
Yeah, great question. And I think this one is something that a lot of people wonder about. In my opinion, you really shouldn't have to convince them, but rather you should redesign how your decisions are getting made and how they see value in your CRM. So it's not a matter of like really convincing them, but kind of more showing them that this is where the value is. I think senior leaders are only going to use a CRM if it's the fastest way to get answers and it's really like this source of truth for reporting and decisions are based off of what's in it. So instead of, maybe stop sending these separate reports with slide decks and all this data that's compiled and start running some of your meetings like directly from your CRM dashboards. I think when leadership can ask like, how's this campaign doing? And who are our top donors this quarter? And if they're having to go outside of the CRM to get that answer, then that really is a problem. Rather, if the CRM is where these decisions happen and where the information is laying, then it's where the leaders are going to want to spend their time. So all in all, I think it has to really have that real value for them to want to use it.
All right, thanks. Thanks so much for that response.
Mm.
and for the person who shared that question. All right, next audience question. Currently, development, administration, and finance use our CRM, but should all of our team be using it?
I don't think that everyone needs a super deep usage, but kind of back to our point earlier about adoption, everyone should touch it and everyone should know how to use it. So when only one department is really using that CRM, you do get this fragmentation, and versus when multiple team members are using it, you're going to get this shared context, and that just alone is going to drive better outcomes. Research consistently shows that CRMs work best when they have a central system across their teams, not just a fundraising tool. So I don't think that the goal is necessarily equal usage, but it is still like this connected usage and visibility.
Great. And TG, thank you for this next question. What is the biggest mistake you see nonprofits making over and over with regards to their CRM and growth?
That's a great question. I think a big mistake that I see is the reliability of the data. And so I think that can mean a lot of different things. One, I think is having to import and export data constantly. Like there is this room for human error. And so I think the biggest thing that starts to come from that is that people can't trust the data that's in the CRM. So it's great to have a tool, but the tool becomes useless if you can't trust like the reports that you're pulling from it. And so I think that whether that means like you're evaluating your processes and how the data, reliability is, you're looking at all of that and thinking about, where can we stop importing and exporting to have a little bit less error, or if it's about like creating a more systematic process for inputting information as well. The more consistency that you can get across team members and multiple different departments, the more that you can really trust the data that's coming out of your CRM. And then you're spending less time trying to clean up and determine if this data is even helpful. And you're able to actually just look at it and then make a decision.
Great. Thanks so much for that question. It
Yeah.
looks like Stephanie Willis added a question in the chat. What if you have team members who struggle with change and new things? For instance, a longtime database administrator who is protective of a system.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's really common and it usually does come from a really good place. Like longtime admins are protective of the system because they're responsible for it and they've put so much time and effort into keeping it clean and all those things. I think the key really is to not work around them, but to bring them into the process early and kind of position them as like a partner and not a blocker. But at the same time, you do still have to shift from one person owning the system to the system supporting the whole team. And I think when they can start to see the value in the rest of the team having access to what they have access to, that's really where their mindset will shift. So instead of them having to like pull multiple reports for people and spend all this time pulling those reports, when they're able to see, hey, this team member can just go into the CRM and access this information themselves rather than ask me for it, then they really are getting that time back in their day and hopefully are starting to see the value of it.
Great. Just a reminder, we have 5 minutes left. So if you have any additional questions, please do go ahead and type that into the chat or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. This question's from Rob Keller. How are you seeing AI being used by gift officers to better leverage CRM data and engage donors and volunteers?
Yeah, great question. The way that we've seen AI being used right now, I think is, there's a lot of still, I think, concerns around AI integrating with your CRM, of course, because of donor privacy. So right now, I think we've seen more usage of AI towards like the appeals in the language that you're using. So Giveffect specifically has an AI writer, and you're able to input a prompt, or it kind of helps build the prompt for you. You're able to put your audience and what kind of appeal you're making. And then it's really going to speed up that process by giving you really targeted language to be able to use.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Um, here's a good question. Best CRM for a nonprofit organization. We may be a little biased,
I
but
was gonna say I'm a little biased here, but Giveffect, I think as a 10-in-1 system does become a really great option for nonprofits who are trying to eliminate silos and eliminate that duplicate work between departments because it does create the one source of truth. Going back to the question earlier, about mistakes that I see and data cleanliness and all that kind of thing. Um, Give effect reducing the amount of importing and exporting that you ever have to do because all of your data is living in one system, I think is such a pro and does really allow teams to be able to trust the data that's coming out of Give effect.
um, I remember who was it recently that said if they have to reset one more password for one of their tools, they're just done with it. So
Yeah,
you
that's an
no
added
longer
bonus too,
you
for
no
sure.
longer have to do that.
Yeah, one less login to have to remember. We love that.
Great. Let's see. Oh, here's a great question. Will there be another session that is longer than 30 minutes? Or our speed learning sessions, we do try to keep them to about 30 minutes, but we will have another session next month, so keep an eye out in your inbox for an invitation. And if this session really resonates with you, I'm going to share in the chat a link where you can schedule a strategy call where you can meet with a Give Effect team member, talk a little bit more about, what your situation, what you're dealing with, what you're trying to achieve. And it's not a pitch, it's not a demo, it's a conversation to figure out what the best next step is for your team. So I hope you'll take advantage. I'm also, again, putting in the link to our LinkedIn page. So just a quick reminder, we are doing a Coffee on Us giveaway. So in order to enter, simply follow us on LinkedIn, find one of our April posts, share something that you learned about today or something that you hope to do, and tag at Giveffect so we can find you easily. And we'll be notifying 3 winners via email by noon Eastern today. Um, with that, I think we have one last question, and then we'll call it a day. Can Giveffect handle designation payouts natively?
Yes, I guess maybe might be better question for a strategy call to hear a little bit more about what you're looking for. Um, so I would encourage you to schedule and we can definitely talk through what that looks like inside of our product.
Great. And with that, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And thank you, Hannah, for sharing all your great insights from working with all the nonprofits that you work with. And again, we hope to hear from all of you. Please keep an eye out in your inbox. We will be sending the replay as well as again, the links that if you do want to schedule that strategy call, you will have that right in your inbox. So thank you all again for joining, and we hope to see you next month.